welcome to 74 and 74. We dedicate a little longer again than 74 seconds to talk about some films we've got coming up in our cinema. And this is a special 74 and 74 where we're focusing on a new film coming out, which is quite a different title than we've had in our cinema. And it's a Romanian film called Bad Luck Banging or Loony Porn. There's a lot in this film to unpack. So we've got some amazing special guest speakers who've come to share their interpretation of the film and some insights, which I'm hoping you, the audience, can take away and have a think about and help connect and join some dots in the film you've either seen already or you're about to see. So you know me, I'm Claire, I'm the film programmer here at Exeter. And we've got João, who is a professor at the University of Exeter, who focuses research on pornography as well as a world of other visual culture elements. And we've got Amber Goodwin-Figers, who's a sex positive. How would you describe yourself? A sex positive?
Mental health advocate, I guess. And I also am a co-founder and co-producer of Bloom, which is Exeter Phoenix's mental health awareness festival, so framing mental health wellness around art as a tool of expression.
Brilliant. And that takes place, is it in May, Amber?
Yes, hopefully within the first few weeks of May, yeah.
Fantastic, there's more on that to come. And we've got Saskia Laban. Hi Saskia, thanks for joining us. Who's a qualified psychotherapist, and you specialise in relationship therapies. And I'm right in thinking you're steering your career towards kind of sexology and sex therapy. So
that's correct.
Really interesting things to share with us today as well. So let's have a think. Bad Luck Banging, we've all watched it. So who's this film for? Do we have any ideas of who's going to get something out of this film?
It's there's a little bit for everyone, really. There is a very graphic consensual sexing at the beginning. So depending what your opinions are on that, if you're happy seeing that or not. But it's got a bit of everything. It's funny, it's creative, it's really sex positive, and a really strong feminist film. Kind of opened my eyes to a lot of new things. It's a really refreshing film, I think.
Okay. I like that you've taken away that element. João, what did you take away from the film?
I mean, I think it's fantastic to start with. It's really, I mean, I think it really does show what kind of cinema can be at its best in terms of holding some kind of mirror back to us. And yes, like Amber said, there's an explicit sex scene at the beginning, which is basically at the core of the narrative. But I think that the film is really a political commentary on I don't know, the kinds of the things we are willing to accept and live with, and the things that we find unacceptable and maybe in the grand scheme of things are actually quite small. So these things that we agree or we ignore, and then we obsess with things that actually may be nothing, like, you know, the sex scene. Like, you know, the recording of a sex scene.
Yeah, which actually, when you break it down, is actually quite sweet. It's a couple, that's no secret.
It's adorable. I mean, it's so cute.
There's a brilliant scene where her mum's knocking on the door, trying to interrupt them to ask a really domestic question. And in that sense, it's, you know, it's really unoffensive. It's not, you know, it's private. They do that really well. Saskia, what about you? What do you take away from, because you've literally fresh out of this film, you've watched it.
I actually really enjoyed how it normalised making sex tapes. I think there is still quite a lot in society around whether or not that's acceptable, especially with the rise in revenge porn and things like that. So I really enjoyed Emmy's sort of argument and her kind of confidence in saying that this is a normal thing and it's a private thing to do. I really enjoyed that element. I like the feminist theme running throughout as well. And I actually enjoyed seeing in a sort of a very body-focused way, different genitalia actually demonstrate throughout the film as well, because there's quite a lot in sort of how you should and shouldn't look in terms of genitalia that runs alongside pornography and the effect that has in our sort of the youth growing up and what they think they should look like. So I actually enjoyed the variety as well there, which it was really body positive, I thought, for the most part. Yeah, that was one of my thoughts.
I agree. I'm curious to know, is something like a part of like sex therapy or couples therapy, would someone recommend that a couple might try something like this out? Would that be seen as like a healthy thing to do? You'd
definitely be advised to be experimental if you want to, but it probably more sort of along the lines of sensate focus, which is a kind of more meditative sort of area of working together. But, you know, having some fun and making a sex video, that would be a great way to connect in a couple. But I do feel that revenge porn and these things being leaked is something that people hold on to a lot. So I think this film is really important for people to notice that it is normal and it can be great fun and such a beautiful moment to share with someone. But there are these sort of side effects. I think it's actually the company that, is it the company or the people that were sort of sorting out her computer that actually leak?
Yeah, they don't make a huge thing about the
no,
it's not really the point. It's not the that's something I was thinking about, that idea of blaming and it's more about the response, isn't it, and the reaction
absolutely
people have. And I'm interested, just thinking about everything that goes on around us and how that is kind of flipped. I'm wondering if it would be, do you think, a similar response if it had been a male teacher who had had this?
I did wonder.
I mean, it's a big question, but I can't help thinking that you look at the, just with, who am I thinking of, the WAP that broke the internet, that song that came out, and the response to that, and I think that's definitely them taking some ownership of kind of the female lens and how we talk about female sexuality. And I do wonder if this film would be different if they're taking a different story. They're trying to tell the story of how this female teacher, even though she's married, that doesn't seem to affect people's responses.
I mean, even if she was not married, but I mean, I think there's certainly an angle that is really important in the film, which is obviously the fact that she's a woman. And the association of how we may see negatively a woman who is proudly kind of enjoying sex and has fun with it. How that is seen somehow, you should just have sex to reproduce. You shouldn't have sex to have fun. And I think that is a really important kind of narrative there. When the issue where if it were a male teacher, I think that potentially the repercussions would, at the level of the school or say the university, whatever it would be, it would very much be the same or very similar, because I think the issue there has to do with institutional kind of dynamics and then bringing in the figure of the children. Oh my God, what will happen to the children? And there's been many cases of both men and women and non-binary academics or teachers who have been in situations similar to this one, and it's very difficult because of the kind of worms that is kind of pornography or sex tapes, and how we don't know how to deal with it very well.
I think it's really interesting that, as you say, there's this taboo aspect of sexuality, obviously, and so it is. Her sex tape is immediately demonized as something that's going to be some horror for that the children will see. How dare they be exposed to sex? But also completely negating the fact that she didn't intend anyone else to see it. And then there's this really interesting dynamic around her sexuality is perfectly fine when it's this object for consumption. There's a scene where various teachers or colleagues and parents are watching this video, and they can't be torn away from watching this video. But then when they're discussing the fact that she's having sex in the tape, she's condemned. It's hideous that she has her own sexual expression. It's fine when she's an object for consumption, but when it's about her autonomy, her expression, how dare you subject my children to these horrors? When, as you say, Claire, it's actually a really lovely quite poignant moment. She has herself, her autonomy, and there's this little moment of domesticity at the beginning of that tape, and it's real, it's human, it's truthful. And then there is that theme as well about what we want to accept as truth, what we want to look at and engage with, and what we think is not worth our time or abhorrent in some way. It's there's a really fascinating kind of elements running through it, I think.
Yeah, and it's much more about, you know, the context of that film rather than, like you said, the content, isn't it? And I think you're right. There's that. You know, there's a lot to do with private life and public life that people are seen in this film, isn't there? So there's things like, or even the fact that the fact that they have masks, it's timely. You know, it was filmed at the time of COVID, but also that says a lot about the stuff that we cover up and the stuff that's exposed. And you see people behaving awfully at the start of the film, and she's like walking through town, don't you? And in the supermarket, running over that gentleman in the car and being cruel to each other in a way that I wouldn't want anyone to see that side of me. But that seems okay in public life. And then you've got this idea of private life and covering up. And I don't know if anyone else picked up on that kind of side of it.
Yeah, I sort of noticed a real sort of paradox as well in terms of sort of having a financial, but the differences in financial backgrounds for different people. I think there was a bit in the middle of the film where they were saying about having to walk alongside walk on the pedestrian part of the road and watching those on a higher income, and in cars being able to drive past, and sort of it really bringing home the sort of inequalities and disparities in people's sort of income and livelihood. And with that, just noticing as she's just going about her day and doing her things, like you said, some of these awful things that were coming out, and the way that she got approached by people as well, and watching people arguing over it, it really kind of raised that for me. And those sort of shocking moments that really came out of nowhere, but actually that is life. It is like that.
Yeah, almost done in this comical way, but it's not really.
Yeah.
There's kind of this kind of almost like meta text, or like going through around, you know, the right place of things, right? Right where, and even the middle section, which is incredible, the part two, it's all about, you know, these kinds of really funny comments on you know, where things belong, you know, socially, politically, how we kind of organize things. And I think a lot of it that is really, like you said, at the core is really this idea of like the private and the public, and it's so foundational, I think, for our culture to think that, you know, sex is allowed as long as no one sees it and it happens in private. And, you know, I'm a gay man. Gay men have this long history of, you know, like cruising and public sex, and it's always been this thing that is really extremely regulated, because we allow it to happen as long as no one sees it. I mean, back in the day, even if as long as your partner doesn't see you, it needs to be in the dark. So it's just interesting to think about, why is that? You know, why is it that sex needs to be matrimonial, indoors, under the sheets, in the dark, and, you know, and no one can see it.
Yeah.
It's so important to our culture. It's quite unfortunate, because, you know, then it also leads us not to talk about it with teenagers or children in, you know, age appropriate ways. It just means that we can't even talk about it.
That reminds me of a point in, as you say, in that second section, had all these lovely clips pulled together, where there's a tour guide showing around historic buildings with a tour group, and they're interested. Look at the building, take some pictures, you know. And then the tour guide, starts talking about this really brutal history about this building. People start taking selfies, wandering off. And I think quite soon after, there's a quote about Medusa and how that story is talking about not wanting to look at the truth, to look away, to not face it directly. And you see that the whole way through. There's the truth of her sexuality, the truth of all of these kind of power struggles within the film, but no one wants to address them, and the intolerances we see in the third half that she's trying to combat. No one wants to actually look at the raw human truth, that connection, what it actually means, just what we think it means. And it's just so beautifully done, the way those three, without giving much away, how those three sections tie in. it's just really, really beautifully done, I think.
Yeah, it's got an interesting flow, hasn't it? Unlike
Mm.
films I've seen. And yes, that scene, the kind of third bit where she's basically put on trial. Certainly not the first woman to be put on trial in this way, and that's very interesting. And then they bring in these members of the community, don't they, who we kind of had hints of throughout the film, representing different corners of their society. Yeah, that's really observant, I think. And I'd forgotten the scene about the tour guide. I think that was so much. Yeah, it's the Romanian film, which I don't think you mentioned, and it's the Oscar entry for Romania, and it also won the Top Award at Berlin. So it's people are associating it with it all around the world. It's not just Brits, but they're getting a lot out of it in the States as well. It's been really well reviewed there. So I mean, what's the main thing we can take away? What's the main thing that I think we've learned from this film, or people might get out of it, do you think?
I think at the as you say, that scene where it's almost like she's on trial, and then as she begins kind of fighting her corner, it feels quite aptly, it feels like a classroom situation where she is schooling them, teaching them on the truth of that connection, the truth of how we interact. And then that really lovely satirical ending. And I think it really is about strength and self and inner truths, and how glorious sex can be when you're being honest and truthful about it. And it feels a very hopeful film, I think. I mean, there's so many struggles and kind of abuse of power in the film, and her kind of battling against that. And it feels like it's a film that's kind of encapsulating a change in historic movement, and it feels a very hopeful film ultimately, I think.
Yeah, I think there's obviously a very kind of cultural and contextualization in Romania, legacy of communism and all of that. But I think beyond the kind of the space and the time of the narrative, it's really about, I mean, to me, it really makes me think, what are the kinds of things that sustain our morality and our judgment of others, and why are they there? Like what makes us judge someone automatically about something, right? And not stop to ask, what sustains these value judgments? Because morality can be really, really difficult and and nasty and horrible. And to me, that's really what it made me, the whole thing, especially also through the middle section, are built into that really, what is the kind of ideology, I guess, to use the word, that sustains our moral judgments.
I think for me, again, I'm going to use the word normalizing here, but it for me, it left me realizing that, especially if younger generations watch this, noticing the battle between old messages and new normals, this kind of sort of battle that kind of goes on at the moment. This film almost represents it in a whole, in those lovely three parts. I kind of love the way it was done in that way. And at the end, just like Amber said, the sort of almost classroom etiquette of like, this is actually normal, and actually you're allowed to do these things. We don't need to be shamed for these things anymore. But just breaching that out as a sort of societal message all around the world, that this is sort of the case, that this is happening everywhere. For me anyway, sort of just focusing very much in Britain, but this film being Romanian, showing that this movement is happening all over, and actually just how important it is. And I really hope that viewers watch it and get some of Emmy's courage and take that with them if they've ever experienced this as well. The fact that she had the courage to sit there and sort of argue her point. And I really enjoyed the third ending. I think that really highlights our deepest, darkest desire when something really feels unjust. I must admit, I was kind of rooting for her right at the end. So yeah, that was it for me, really.
She's unflinching, and in fact, I think there was one review I read where the ending was described as the surprising best superhero movie film of the year. So I think Leave it on that for our audience to be like, ah. And we're all here, audience. So when you've watched it and you're absorbing things, then come back. We'd love to hear what you all think. And so Bad Luck Banging and Loony Porn is going to be in Studio 74, I think, from around the 10th of December. And details will be online. Thanks ever so much, everybody.